Hi, I'm Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdoc Online. I want to remind you we're brought to you in part by Real Screen Summit. If you want more information about all their activities, go to our website at westdoc.net or westdoconline.com. Scroll down to the bottom and there's a real screen icon there. You can click on it and get all the information. Today we have the honor and privilege of having the Oscar-nominated filmmakers Julian Brave Noisecat and Emily Kassie for their film Sugarcane. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey, Chuck.
Yeah, we're doing well. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for having us.
I always ask, where are you located at the
It's
moment?
the Weezer song. Do you know it? Beverly Hills.
What was the hotel, or what is it?
It's
I didn't
Beverly.
hear.
Julian's referencing a song by Weezer that goes
Oh,
Beverly Hills. We're in Los Angeles.
We're in a hotel room.
okay. Well, that's fine. I actually know Beverly Hills quite well. Have lived there myself twice in my life, once as a child and once as an adult, but I escaped. So here we
We
are.
will escape eventually. It's going to be about a week from now, though.
Well, first, let me just say congratulations to you guys. I'm sure you're sort of aware of it in a way, but I don't think you really realize how big a deal this is. Just getting nominated is a huge deal. So congratulations
Thank
on.
you. Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, it's pretty surreal. And I think I'll just gonna plug this. This is actually the first time that an Indigenous North American filmmaker has been nominated for an Academy Award. So, there's the incredible honor of our film being nominated, and also I think pretty incredible that Julian has broken some big ceilings. So it's a big moment for the community and for us and for him.
And you will enjoy going to the Oscars. It is really exciting and very much fun, especially if you win. But even if you don't, it's still fun, and there's a good dinner at the end that you'll hopefully enjoy. How did this film come about?
Yeah, so you know, Chuck, I grew up in a community of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. My mom worked in hospitals with Holocaust survivors, and that was really kind of the framework that I moved through the world. And so I set off on a career as a documentarian and investigative journalist, focusing on human rights abuses in persecuted communities all over the world, from Afghanistan to Niger. But I had never turned my lens on my own country. I'm born in Canada, and there was what I didn't know was that there was a horrific system of forced assimilation over 6 generations of Indigenous children forcibly removed from their homes and sent to these schools where they were systematically abused and stripped of their culture and language and ability to be parented by their own families. And when I heard the news of potential unmarked graves on the grounds of one of these schools, I felt completely gut pulled towards this story. The other thing that I felt compelled to do right after reading this story was reach out to my friend Julian. This is him. And that's because Jules and I worked our first reporting jobs together a decade ago. We were cub reporters in a newsroom, randomly sat at the desks next to each other. And Julian is one of the most brilliant writers I know, an incredible storyteller, and also a historian and a thought leader on Indigenous life in North America. And so had this incredibly deep knowledge and perspective about this particular story. And so I reached out to him, asked if he wanted to work on something. He said, let me give it some thought. And in the meantime, I went looking for a nation that said they were going to start a search. And I found this article in the Williams Lake Tribune about Chief Willie Sellers. And I sent him a cold email. He called me back that exact afternoon and he said, the creator has always had great timing. Just yesterday, our council said we need someone to document this search. So I got my gear together. I was ready to go to Williams Lake 2 weeks later. And that's when I heard back from Julian.
And when I called them back and told her, hey, sorry for the delay, been thinking about it, and I think I'm open to collaborating with you on that documentary. And that's when she said, great, well, I've identified this First Nation that's leading a search, and that search is happening at St. Joseph's Mission near Williams Lake, British Columbia, Canada. And as you might imagine, when Em said that, I was completely floored because, of course, that's the school that my family was sent to and where, to the best of my knowledge at the time, my father was born. So out of 139 Indian residential schools across Canada, Em happened to choose to focus our documentary on the one school my family was taken away to and where my father's life began, without even realizing that that's what she had done.
I felt dirty as an Indian all my life in residential school.
Look at that. It's all names.
When you're brought up in an institution like the Catholic Church, you have strict rules, and you went with their ethics.
I've been trying to find out what happened at St. Joseph's Mission.
Everything was so secretive.
My dad was born there. How did it happen?
It's not something that you want to open up, it just keeps on damaging.
For decades, there were reports of neglect and children dying or disappearing from this facility.
2 girls drowned. Priests were moved around.
Why are they dying? Did they think we'd be stupid all of our lives, the rest of our lives, and nobody would ever find out these things?
Being sorry for something is just the first step. You have to take action.
We see the impacts in our community every single day. And we need to continue to hold each other up.
Julian, I ask you to open your heart. Our people are going to stand up.
Your story is someone who was abandoned, but also who abandoned.
You do know what happened with me, right?
I want to know the whole story.
Emily, were you on this show? Did I read somewhere in the press notes that you were actually on this in advance, for some time before you reached out to Julian?
So I had been looking into it in the time between Julian coming back to me. I arrived right after Julian had told me that he was willing to work on this with me. I arrived to Williams Lake and was there for about a week, I met our characters on the first day, and it was pretty obvious. Chief Willie Sellers, Charlene Bellew, and Rick Gilbert had kind of jumped out at me very, very quickly, and Julian joined me later that week, and we started living this story. We shot 160 days over 2.5 years. We spent 3.5 making the film. And so we kind of just threw ourselves into it. We threw our savings into it as well to get it to happen. It's been a pretty epic journey ever since.
Well, who was paying for all this travel and filmmaking before?
My savings, Chuck. I had, saved up over, a decade of working in newsrooms and having healthcare and getting a salary. And then I was ready to make the leap to make my first feature doc. And the only way to do that, if you don't know anyone in the film world, is to, like many documentary filmmakers, unfortunately, is to use your own funds. And so for almost the first year, that's what we relied on. We didn't pay ourselves. Julian paid for all of his own travel and all of that, and I paid for mine and our hotel rooms, and paid our DP who I shot the film with, and that was it until we started kind of cobbling together grants, and then eventually we got into the Sundance Catalyst Lab, which helped us raise the rest of the funding, led by our incredible producer, my producing partner on the film, Kellen Quinn.
And when did Nat Geo get involved?
Not until after Sundance. We had our world premiere at Sundance as an independent doc. And like so many docs that premiere at that festival, you know, we were hoping that that would be our springboard for many things, including distribution. We had one conversation with Nat Geo the summer before Sundance. They came to the world premiere and were, you know, really taken by the film. Thank the good Lord. And we were really lucky to end up with them. You know, obviously, nobody gets into doc filmmaking hoping to strike it rich. But we, you know, more importantly, found somebody who was going to, you know, treat the film with the sort of integrity that we had approached it in its making. And they really saw the power of this thing, the potential for it to have impact, the artistic merits of it as well. And we feel like ultimately we ended up with the absolute best distributor and team behind this thing.
And it's a moment, of course, where a lot of streamers aren't taking political films. And we believe that this is an extremely political film, and it was very gutsy of them to take it on. You know, it's also like Julian's dad, Ed, is smoking pot the entire film. And there's a lot of, you know, it's heavy, and it takes on the Catholic Church, it takes on the US and Canadian government. It's not an easy film, and so I think we feel just really lucky that they had the guts to do this.
And we hope that, you know, the industry sees that it can be done and follows that example.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me just get this clear. You actually shot, produced, edited, and had put the whole film together on your own before
but
you had...
but we had gotten like grants and all that. So it wasn't like we had done it entirely on our dime at that point. Yeah, we went through, there's a whole documentary funding ecosystem in the US. There is kind of one that's particular to each country. So we, interestingly though, it's a story focused on Canada. We primarily were a US based production, although we did get one significant grant from Canada. And that enabled us to make the film, to pay all of our, you know, collaborators, to eventually finally pay ourselves a salary of sorts, and all that sort of stuff. But of course, the distribution, you know, was after the world premiere, which is, we should say, incredibly common in this art form, and many, as you I'm sure know, you know, many documentaries many people make incredible films that premiere at Sundance, that go on remarkable runs, are in the conversation for Academy Awards, and don't even get the distribution. It's a travesty.
Well, I've talked about this on Westdoc in the last few episodes, that we're in a terrible downturn or a slump, or what, I don't know what you want to call it in the documentary world. And I think it's cyclical, and I'm hoping it'll come back. But I've seen a bunch of docs that are world-class, amazing films, like you say, and they're not getting the distribution that they deserve. That's
right.
Some really, really excellent films, and they're going to end up on, you know, video on demand, you know. And so you can rent them for $4 or $5 or something, but they're not going to be on Netflix or Hulu and so you are streaming actually right now on Disney and Hulu. Is that right?
Yes, we're incredibly lucky. And, you know, we've met, I think one of the most special parts of this last year of promoting the film is that we've met incredible filmmakers, documentary filmmakers who have made extraordinary works, films like Union and No Other Land, and so many more that so deserve the same sort of platform and just aren't getting as much attention. And so we hope it changes, and and as Julian said, we hope that like streamers can look at the success of Sugarcane, you know, which everyone except for Nat Geo turned down, we should say, and say, oh, this can actually work. People actually want to watch art and to know what's going on in the world and to understand people, and they don't just need, you know, superhero movies and cooking shows, which are great, but like they can actually handle grappling with the issues of today and with really cinematic human stories. And so, hopefully that really changes.
So I always ask the filmmakers, or I usually ask if I don't forget, what was the area of the budget of the film? And I usually get fairly good answer. You don't have to
Yeah,
if you don't want
yeah.
to, but I'm curious.
As one of the producers, I can handle that. It was it was over 1 million. I can say that. And I will say that 70%, maybe even a little bit more, was in grants. 75% was entirely made up of grants. We had an incredible group of executive producers who both gave us grants and equity. We had impact partners involved, Fit Via V, Linlay, Sons of Rigor, so many more. We really brought together through the Catalyst Sundance program, which helps you create a pitch for your film and then kind of presents it as a TED Talk and brings in all these investors to look at the films and decide if they want to partake. And that program allowed us to bring together an entire kind of village of executive producers who lifted this story together as a collective, which is kind of amazing because I think, art is in many ways a collective action, and Sugarcane certainly is.
Yeah, I would just add that, it's very clear, as Em was saying earlier, and we were trying to make the point, there is a market for stories like this, and we really hope that streamers see that and continue to buy and support films like ours. At the same time, as is true across so many art forms, these kinds of works, the works that really challenge us, the kind of work that we honestly need out in the world, won't exist, could not exist, unfortunately, without support from, supporters of the arts, which can be public institutions as well as, philanthropists. And that's been the case since the origin of art. Art has always needed patrons and benefactors, and we have been incredibly fortunate to work with people who are both generous and kind and also really smart and thoughtful, and in many ways they've brought a lot to this film as well.
I assume that's why there are 33 or 34 producers and executive producers listed on the credits.
Yeah. I think it's a little less than that. I think it's 20. Anyway,
we just sent out an email.
We just
morning.
sent an email. It's not quite 34, but I think you're probably.
I counted them this morning on the list that I have. I included executive producers and producers. Well, look,
including producers as well. You're probably right. Thanks for being so thorough on that, Chuck. Yeah, it really does take a whole community of people to make these sorts of films happen, and we feel really grateful for ours.
So to make it actually perfectly clear for people who have not seen this film, and it definitely is something you should watch, this film is in great part not only about the community, but of course it strikes home. It affects your father, Julian, who was born at this particular residence, and who was about to be abandoned and maybe burned alive. And the most horrific possible. If you wrote this as a fiction piece, people would say, "Oh, that's impossible." And so my question really is Canada and the United States. For the sake of argument, they're both, wonderful countries and great in many, many ways. But how could this possibly happen? And then you throw in the Catholic Church, which was running this particular place, and what you describe is something beyond horrific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on the one hand, obviously the story that we are telling is a story that is very particular. It is in certain ways a horrific story, but it's also a story about really special, incredible people who we were so fortunate to work with and have open up their lives to us. So it is both, horror and also epic triumph in certain ways, a story of survival in the fullest sense of that word. And I think it's also, while this is this film includes discussion of, things that are atrocities, abuse, systematic abuse of multiple generations of children, which even led to, children being fathered by priests at this institution. And one of our participants was the product of one of those, other forms of abuse. it's also was incredibly common. I think it's really important to underscore the extent to which this was a universal experience for Indigenous peoples, not only in Canada, where these schools were compulsory for about 150 years for 6 generations of Native children and their families, but also in the United States, where there were 417, 3 times as many Indian schools, and where the ideology of, in the words of one of the architects of the American as well as the Canadian system, was to quote kill the Indian and save the man. So in a way, our film is obviously about and does break new ground, we should say, on what we describe as a pattern of infanticide at one institution, the very first work in any medium to do such investigative, groundbreaking work. It's also a document about a system that was continental and even global in its scope, because, of course, there were similar systems designed to assimilate and destroy Indigenous culture all around the world, in places like Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and even in places like French Guiana, still operating today.
I think it's hard for people to grapple with the idea that this is the origin story of America. I think there are a lot of different places in time where people want to start the story of America, whether it's 1776, whether it's 1619 when slavery began. But the origin of both countries is the brutalization, genocide, and decimation of native populations, and this is how they did it. Not just through war and treaties that were broken, but through taking away children and removing them from to destroy, not only literally kill people, but to destroy culture, to destroy language, to destroy community bonds and familial bonds, and it has gone largely unknown, which is wild when you think about it, because it existed, as Julian said, for 150 years in both countries. And so we really hope the film, and we believe it is, starts to really change that fundamental understanding and correct the record on how these countries came to be.
What was the post-editing process for you? The length of time, and how did you work?
It took about a year and a half, and I think the first 6 months was watching footage. We had these two incredible editors, Nathan Panwar and Maya Daisy Hogg, and the first was to sort through 160 days of footage and watch it. And we got to this kind of 5.5-hour cut that we loved, with twice as many character lines. And Julian and I really wanted the film to be a lot of things. We wanted it to be, this idea of a reverse Western. A stranger comes to town, but it's actually, the Indigenous people, not the cowboys, who win in the end. We wanted it to speak. We wanted there to be this investigation and 4 different storylines, and speak to, how industry has, like milling and logging, have devastated these communities, and how the Catholic Church has permeated this world. There were so many ideas that we had, and to the great credit of our editors and an incredible collaboration amongst our team, we were able to get to the core of the film, and create these parallel narratives where the investigation reveals the same truth as the personal investigation that Julian and his father are trying to excavate. They actually end up landing at the same conclusion, which is not necessarily about unmarked graves, which is where it all kind of begins, but rather about what happened to the babies born at St. Joseph's Mission, which is a truth that ends up being living evidence in Julian's father. And we did not know that when we began. So it was a really extraordinary journey to make it through that edit.
And I would just say that, there's a ocean of material that we had to get through and figure out how to put together in endless possible permutations and combinations. And what was central to that was, obviously, we had an incredible team in Nathan and Maya and everybody else who got engaged in the edit, including our producer, Kellen Quinn, and our cinematographer, Chris Lamarca, and our composer, Molly Obamsawin. But what we also had was sort of our directorial compass that we developed while we were in the field, really a truly shared vision and understanding of the film that we were setting out to make. And I think that remained, our North Star and helped us always get back to a clear understanding of what it was that we were trying to do and what it was that we were trying to say with this thing, which, was so essential to being able to actually put together, the film that we made.
What's up next? Are you working together on something, or are you on different
Well,
projects?
I'm going to
or-
plug that Julian has an incredible book coming out in the fall. He's an unbelievable writer. That's the trade he came from before filmmaking. And the book is called We Survived the Night, and will be published all over the world, in the US by Knopf. It weaves together, sorry, I like to pitch his book and brag about it because I have nothing to say for myself. But it weaves together personal memoir and oral history, stories of other Indigenous communities across the country, as well as stories about the trickster hero Coyote, who helped create or make the world. It's kind of a beautiful kind of sister to Sugarcane, but goes on its own journey, and everyone should go buy a copy or pre-order it. I think you can start pre-ordering it now. So that's amazing. And there were very special forces that brought us together to make this film. Those forces might come back one day and tell us to do another one, and we'll see. So hopefully that all works out. And as for me, I'll be heading out somewhere else in the world to go start shooting another tale of fortitude and resilience amongst, trauma and conflict.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with both of you. You're fine examples of young filmmakers on a rocket ship up to the top of the world, and congratulations on the nomination, and enjoy the Oscars.